There was a village where the sea met a line of white cliffs, and the sky felt close enough to touch. People there said the horizon was a promise, because each evening the sun drew a thin gold thread between water and air, sewing tomorrow to today. In this village lived a young map maker named Aya, who measured the world with careful eyes and a steady hand. Aya's father had been a sailor who taught her to mark longitude and latitude before she learned to ride a bicycle. "Lons help us find what can't be held," he used to say. "Longitude runs from pole to pole. Latitude wraps the earth like a belt. Between them a person can stand anywhere and know where they are." He had sailed away one season and never returned, taken by a storm that changed direction without warning. People whispered the name of the weather pattern that year, El Niño, and the syllables bent in the wind like a reed. Then the village's seasons had become strangers. The air ran hotter in winter, rain forgot the calendar, and fishermen hauled up ropes snarled with seaweed where fish should have been. The elders said the atmosphere was different, as if the layer of gases surrounding the earth had grown feverish. Aya listened and read and drew. She drew the tides, the wind roses, the shape of clouds. She drew the coastline as a series of pulsing breaths. And in all those drawings, she labeled the spheres she wanted to understand. Atmosphere for sky, hydrosphere for water, lithosphere for rock. "Find how they fit," she whispered, "and maybe I can keep our village safe." One afternoon, the mayor visited her workshop. "Aya," he said, "the cliff path has cracked, yoveling to the edge. If heavy rain comes, the damage could turn into a disaster. We need to know what parts of the cliff are weakest." Aya remembered the storm in which she lost her father. She promised to make a new map and to move quickly. She packed a compass because she trusted the sure tug of a magnet more than the guesswork of a heart, a pressurized canister for taking air samples, a small hammer, and a lens. Her grandmother, who had been a geologist in her youth, insisted on coming. "My bones know these rocks," the old woman said, tapping the cliff with her cane. "The earth has a crust and a mantle and a core beneath it, and this cliff is just a rind on an orange." They climbed before dawn. Mist blurred the edges of things, and the gulls called like old brass hinges. Aya breathed deeply. "Oxygen smells like cold apples near the sea," she said, laughing at herself. Her grandmother smiled. "Oxygen fills our blood, that's true. Main, that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are holding more heat close to the ground. Think of a greenhouse that traps warmth for plants. The atmosphere is doing a similar thing, only we did intended." They reached a fault where the cliff path had buckled. Aya knelt and brushed moss from a seam. The rock glittered faintly. Quartz, and here a ribbon of marl, metamorphosed limestone. Old coral reefs turned to stone by heat and pressure. "The cliff has bones made of ancient seas," Aya sketched quickly. "If the hydrosphere keeps banging waves into this notch, the lithosphere will slough off like wet bread." She sounded proud. "What if the rain comes before we warn the village? Then we walk faster," her grandmother said, and her cane clicked like a metronome. They descended to the beach where pebbles lay like 1,000 smooth moons. Aya picked up a round gray pebble and slipped it into her pocket. "For luck," she said. The tide was running high. A fisherman pointed at a dark line offshore. "Currents are wrong," he told them. "The water is too warm for this month. The children shouldn't swim." He looked tired. "If the pattern holds, we'll see storms where they don't belong." I knew what he meant. El Niño shifted the oceans like a breath in a sleeping house. Windows rattled in one room, pictures tilted in another. It was neither evil nor kind, but the village could suffer all the same. Unusual warmth added to the heat already trapped by the greenhouse effect, and together they could magnify a storm into something catastrophic. Catastrophic is the word people use when damage is so great it feels beyond repair, her grandmother murmured, as if reading her thoughts. "Pebbles into towers. Even after waves tumble them, the children just build again fast. Catastrophic for us doesn't mean catastrophic for the Earth. The planet has survived many calamities. We are the fragile ones. They hiked to a ridge with a view that pulled the eye all the way to the horizon. She took samples of the air in glass vials and wrote O2 for oxygen and CO2 for carbon dioxide in neat columns, then added a row for hydrogen, because she had promised a schoolboy to test his theory that the sea breeze carried more of the lightest element at midday. At a bend, she found rust blooming on a shard of old rail. "Iron oxide," she said, and her grandmother nodded, pleased. "Everything changes when it meets oxygen. That's another lesson of the atmosphere. It invites us to react." Near the old quarry, the path forked. A hand-painted sign warned of loose rock, for a courthouse far inland. Now its floor was a pool, the color of bottle glass. "Ore came from the hill behind it," her grandmother said. "People scraped for copper during hard years. Minerals in those veins taught me more than any professor." They skirted the fence. A cloud bank swelled like a sail toward shore. Aya checked longitude and latitude, marked the direction of the wind, and mapped small fractures in the cliff face. The more lines she drew, the more lines she saw, in rock, in air, in the tide's pull. She felt as if she were tracing a phenomenon that joined every sphere at once, something simple enough to explain yet too large to hold. The story of change. By late afternoon, the ominous cloud had turned a bruised purple. The mayor called. A storm warning came from the city. "They say the system grew faster than expected. You two must return." Aya looked at the cliff and then at her grandmother. The older woman was breathing hard. "The path is narrow. We don't want a mishap." A gust struck them sideways. The first drops were fat and warm. "Monsoon rain," Aya muttered. "In the wrong month." "It's not just an inconvenience. If the storm worsens, it could endanger people on the beach and jeopardize the harbor, especially the South Pier. It's old." A young couple clung to the rail ahead. "The dog!" the woman cried. A small brown animal had scrambled onto a ledge below to bark at the foaming water and could not climb back. Oz's grandmother grabbed Aya's wrist. "No," she whispered. "Aya, the rock there is friable." But the dog barked again, fiercely, as if it believed the sea could be scolded into stillness. Aya handed her pack to her grandmother and lowered herself belly down along the safer side of the crack. "Come on," she coaxed. "Come on, little one." Lightning split the sky, for one moment revealing the layers of the cliff like slices in a cake. Crust-like hardness at the top, softer marble below, intrusive dark seams where old magma had cooled. Thunder rolled a count after, which meant the bolt was not yet overhead. Aya reached. The dog slipped. Her palm found a nub of rock, her other hand, the animal's wet scruff, and with a grunt, she heaved it onto the path. The couple sobbed thanks. Aya was shaking. Her grandmother wrapped her in a coat. "The old woman said can make us foolish," the old woman said kindly. "But it also shows us what we're made of." They reached the highest overlook as the storm struck. Wind bent the pines. Rain charged the air with scent. Far down the coast, a section of cliff calved into the sea like a white whale diving. Aya felt the drop in her knees. "That's the weak knot," she said. "The one I marked." She took a breath. "We need to close the upper path to keep people away until the ground dries, and we should build a guide of evacuation routes, using longitude and latitude so tourists don't get lost in a whiteout. We need a signal that doesn't fail when the grid does." She lifted the compass, like trusting north. They sheltered in a stone hut. Aya looked at her notes by the light of her headlamp. "If we want fewer calamities, we have to change what we can at home," she said slowly. Reduce carbon dioxide emissions from our boats and trucks. Plant trees along the bluff so roots can knit the soil. Stop quarrying near the fault. None of this is dramatic, but it adds up. Her grandmother smiled. Change often looks like small stones added to a wall. A village is a wall we build together. The storm raged for hours. They heard a siren in the town below, and then, after a long time, the hush that follows exhaustion. Toward dawn, the keys, the air felt rinsed. The atmosphere had shed its weight and now carried a gentler cool. In the east, a coin of pale light lifted, and the horizon, once a thread of gold, returned like a promise kept. They walked home as the village woke. People swept porches, checked moorings, and called to friends across puddled streets. News came. A few roofs leaked. A store's sign had splintered. A shaky image on someone's phone showed the South Pier still standing. Aya brought her maps to the town hall and spoke simply. Where the cliff was weak, how to mark safe routes, where to plant, how to repair. She explained why the hydrosphere's warm currents had fed the storm, how the lithosphere's fractures had guided the collapse, and how the atmosphere's heat, raised by greenhouse gases, had added energy like kindling. These are not enemies, she said, but we must respect them. We endanger ourselves. If we treat them carelessly, we jeopardize our future. After the meeting, Aya walked to the beach. Children were already building again, balancing pebbles and small towers that tilted like laughter. One boy showed her a dark stone with a metallic glint. "Is it a mineral?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "A little piece of ore. You can tell by the weight and shine. But we leave it here so the shore keeps its stories." He nodded solemnly and placed the stone on top of his tower, a crown for his castle. Aya sat where the tide hissed over the sand. In her pocket, the gray pebble warmed to her skin. She wrote in her notebook a simple legend for a new map. Atmosphere, the breath of the village. Hydrosphere, the memory of the sea. Lithosphere, the bones of the cliff. Corn, the hidden forge that makes a magnet of the earth. The page on which we write our life's mantle. The slow river that carries heat from the core to the surface, shaping continents while we sleep. Longitude and latitude, the strings of a harp where every place hums its note. Altitude, the length of a stair we climb to find cool air. Horizon, a promise never reached, always leading us home. She thought of her father out beyond all horizons. If he could see her now, he would tell her that no map is complete without a compass rose to point toward truth. Aya saw that the compass she carried had flecks of rust where iron met air. Oxide had bloomed like tiny red flowers. She did not mind. She wiped the face clean and drew a new rose on her chart, then added a note to the village, raise signals on the bluff, plant coastal forests, retrofit the pier, and teach the children why quartz gleams and marble weathers, and why storms have names not to frighten us but to help us remember. The next days were filled with repair. She and her grandmother walked the path often, checking markers. As summer hinted its arrival, the sea settled into a tempered song. The village breathed easier. One evening, the mayor unveiled Aya's map in the square. A sweep of coastline drawn with patient lines, safe paths in green, risks in amber, refuges in blue. People stood quietly before it, as one stands before a painting that feels both beautiful and useful under the map. Aya had written a single sentence: "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the craft of knowing the earth well enough to choose wisely when the wind begins to rise." Children danced in circles. Aya's grandmother squeezed her hand. "You map more than cliffs," she said. "You mapped how we live with change." Night folded over the village. The constellation of porch lights blinked on. The tide carried away broken reeds and brought back clean foam. Somewhere a fisherman checked his net, careful not to take more than the sea could give. In the quiet, Aya felt the planet turning. Mantle flowing slow as honey, core spinning like a heart, the magnetic field unfurling like a great invisible cloak. Atmosphere sighing around it all. The world seemed fragile and immense at once. When she finally slept, reaching from the beach to the sky. Each step was a concept she had learned: hydrosphere, lithosphere, atmosphere. On the highest step she turned to look back and saw the village, small and shining. It was not safe from every storm, but it was wiser. And wisdom, she thought, is a kind of shelter we build word by word, map by map, until even a catastrophic night cannot unhouse us completely. In the morning, she woke to gulls and the clink of ships. She opened the window. The air was crisp with oxygen and salt. The horizon floated where it always had, a quiet line of possibility. Aya set her compass on the table, placed the gray pebble beside it, and began to draw the next map.